It's pretty wild to think that one of the sharpest critiques of our modern individualistic world was actually written over 150 years ago. Today, we're diving into Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy, an essay from the Victorian era that has some shockingly relevant things to say about right now.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1869. England is this booming industrial powerhouse, but the poet and critic Matthew Arnold, he's looking around and seeing something else entirely. He sees social unrest, huge political divides, and a culture that he feels is just losing its moral compass. So he writes this book, Culture and Anarchy. And it's not just some stuffy literary review. It's more like an urgent diagnosis for a society he believed was getting really, really sick.
So, here's how we're going to break down his argument. First, we'll dig into the Victorian identity crisis that had him so worried. Then, we'll unpack this problem he called anarchy, and his big solution, culture. After that, we'll explore these two big forces he saw at war for the soul of society. And finally, we'll ask what his ideas of sweetness and light could possibly mean for us today.
To really get Arnold, you have to get his time. Victorian England was a world of just incredible contrasts. I mean, on the one hand, you've got this amazing progress, factories, railways, global trade. The country was bursting with confidence and wealth. But on the other hand, you had these deep, deep social divides, fiery debates about political reform, and this feeling that all the old certainties were just kind of melting away.
Arnold had this totally counterintuitive idea. He argued that the very things making Victorian England so successful, all that capitalism, free trade, and rugged individualism, were also its biggest weakness. He was convinced they were creating a society where everyone was just out for themselves, with absolutely no sense of a greater collective good.
And that brings us to the core problem he zeroed in on. He called it anarchy. But when he said that, he didn't just mean riots and chaos in the streets. He was talking about something much deeper, a kind of spiritual anarchy.
For Arnold, anarchy was this widespread belief in just doing as one likes. It was this mindset that personal freedom is the ultimate prize, that there's no higher authority, not the state, not tradition, not some collective ideal that we should ever submit to. He saw this as an incredibly dangerous path, one that would eventually just lead to society falling apart.
And this wasn't a problem he saw in just one group. Arnold was a really sharp social observer, and he argued that this anarchic instinct had poisoned all three major classes in England. It just looked a little different in each one.
First up, the aristocracy, who he cheekily nicknamed the barbarians. He saw them as these great champions of personal liberty, obsessed with their own freedom, their hunting, their fancy manners. But that fierce individualism meant they resisted any central authority that might mess with their privileges. Their version of doing as one likes was all about status.
Next, the Philistines. That's the booming middle class. These were the factory owners, the shopkeepers, the guys building the empire. Their whole world revolved around business, progress, and making money. But Arnold said their obsession with the machinery of life, with wealth and industry, made them totally blind to any higher purpose. Their doing as one likes was all about their own bottom line.
And finally, you have the populace, the working class. Arnold saw them as this huge emerging force, just starting to find their political voice. But he also described them as raw and half-developed. He was afraid that without the right guidance, all their new energy would just turn into a crude version of doing as one likes, leading to riots and social breakdown.
Okay, so if every single class in society is infected with this dangerous impulse towards anarchy, what's the solution? What's the antidote to a world where everyone is just following their own little whims?
Arnold's answer comes down to one powerful word: culture. But his definition of culture is probably not what you're thinking. It's not about going to the opera or knowing about fine art. For Arnold, it was something way more profound. It was the study and the pursuit of human perfection.
See, culture, for Arnold, is this effort to develop ourselves completely in harmony. It's about nurturing all sides of our nature, not just our business skills or our political anger, but everything, all in balance. It's this journey to become the absolute best version of ourselves we can be. And this is the key. Culture isn't a static thing. It's not a finish line you cross. It's an active, ongoing process inside you. It's the constant struggle to rise above our ordinary self, the self that's driven by prejudice, greed, and just random impulses, and to find and nurture our best self, the one that's connected to reason and the common good.
Now, to make things a little more interesting, Arnold said this whole struggle between our ordinary self and our best self plays out through two huge competing spiritual forces that have shaped all of Western civilization. He called them Hellenism and Hebraism.
So on one side, you have Hellenism. Think ancient Greece. Its whole purpose is to see things as they really are, to know the truth. It's all about clear thinking, being flexible, and what Arnold famously called sweetness and light. Then, on the other side, you have Hebraism. Think Old Testament. Its main drive is all about conduct and obedience. It's about doing things, moral duty, and a strictness of conscience. Arnold calls its energy fire and strength.
So Arnold's big diagnosis was that his society was dangerously out of whack. The middle-class Philistines especially were all Hebraism, all fire and strength. They were obsessed with doing, with following rigid rules, with work, work, work. But they were totally lacking the Hellenistic sweetness and light, that ability to think clearly, to question their own beliefs, and to see the bigger picture.
So you can see the two paths laid out pretty clearly here. The path toward culture is the way of Hellenism. It's about finding our best self through reason, through sweetness and light. But the path to anarchy, that's when Hebraism gets out of balance. It's just blindly following our ordinary self with its rigid rules and all its fire and strength, but without any clear-sighted thought to guide it.
All right, so what in the world does any of this have to do with us, more than a century and a half later? Is this just some dusty old book? Or does Arnold's cure for chaos actually have something to tell us?
Well, when you think about it, Arnold's diagnosis feels incredibly modern. We live in a world that basically worships the idea of doing as one likes. Our entire culture is built on radical individualism, on personal choice, on chasing your own self-interest. Arnold's work is a direct challenge to that whole way of thinking. He makes us ask, has our obsession with personal freedom cost us our shared sense of purpose?
So the big takeaway is this. Arnold's idea of culture is a deeply moral and social project. It's a call for us as a society to agree that there's something more important than our own individual wants, our own political team, or our own bank account. It's a call to chase after a shared idea of human perfection, our collective best self. And that really leaves us with a huge, challenging question. In an age of social media, political bubbles, and endless consumerism, a world that is literally built on the idea of doing as you like, what could a shared vision of our best self even look like? And, maybe more importantly, who gets to decide? That's the question Arnold's work still throws at us today.